Thank you for early departure.
That's on council business.
And that's on council business.
Sure.
And thank you. And I will move receipt of those apologies. Have a second, please. Councillor Walker. All those in favour say aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Any declarations of interest, members, on any topic before us here today? There being none, we'll move past that, and I'll move to confirm the minutes of 5 February, seconded by Councillor Hills. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Takes us to item 4, petitions. There are none. We move to item 5, which is public input. Members, just give you a little bit of a wrap on what's been asked for today. I'm mindful of a very chunky agenda before us and possibly a long haul into the afternoon. And I'm also mindful of the standing orders that limit the public input to 30 minutes. But we've had 7 requests, I should say, and I've seen to reconcile those requests with the standing orders and accepted 6 of them, there were 8. And 1 request was withdrawn and 1 deferred. The deferred request, I'll come to that, was from Claudia Moran, and that was related to street closures and the City Centre Master Plan refresh. We don't have that paper before us today, but I'm anticipating that paper at our next agenda, and that is the appropriate time for that representation to be made. 1 request withdrawn was from Craig Shearer of Shearer Consulting, and that related to our approach to Marina's paper before us today. The requester was unable to attend at 9:30, and we can't really accommodate that person later in the agenda. So we invited that requester to table information, and I think that is going to be distributed. Is that correct? Yes. Thank you. So that takes us to the Howick Youth Council. They'll present first, and then we'll hear from the Auckland Community Housing Providers Network. And then the presenters on marinas. We've asked, just to be efficient with the time here and with the messaging, if they might like to come to the table together, and the parties have agreed. And I really want to thank all those parties and acknowledge them for fitting in with us there. So first up, we will take Ben Fraser from the Howick Youth Council to look at a proposal from the Youth Council on the Pikaranga Highway. There you are, Ben. Welcome. Come on up, Ben. Ben, would you like to introduce your colleagues from the Youth Council? And we've got a short presentation from you, and allow you to proceed. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks to the Planning Committee for allowing us to come here today and present to you on putting a T2 lane down Pakaranga Road. Beside me is the Chair of the Howick Youth Council, Jack Collins, our Communications Lead, Ira Lee, and I'm the Deputy Chair. And I'll pass over to Jack to first give you some information about the T2 lane.
Kia ora. Well, firstly, I just want to thank you guys for having me today. This is my first time in a meeting room like this. So firstly, I want to start talking about is the T2 lane consultation. So for those who don't know, the T2 lane being built in Pakaranga is the outermost westbound lane on Pakaranga Road. Now, why we did consultation was that we saw that AT wasn't doing any consultation with the wider public. And we wanted to do consultation that specifically targeted the youth of Howick. Now, the reason we're doing this was because in previous years, we have an event called the Youth Summit. Now, with the Youth Summit, we gather 100 students from each school into a space, and we do like a workshop with them about issues in Howick. And one issue that pops up every year is the issues with public transport. Now, with that, we found that, yes, there was issues with the public transport, but there was a lack of consultation around that. Now, some of the findings that we got from our consultation was that 70% of all 97% respondents supported the introduction of the westbound T2 bus lane Pakuranga Road. 76% of the 66 respondents aged 13 to 24 supported the introduction of a westbound T2 lane on Pakuranga Road. Public transport users, 93%, 28 respondents on the total 97 were in favour of the T2 lane. Car users, a little over half. So basically, as a youth council, we want to take a position that we don't for or against, but we do want to highlight that the majority of youth surveyed were in favour of the T2 and Park and Ride from Lloyd Alsmore. And our ask is that next time a project comes around, we want consultation.
Lovely, thank you very much. So now we're talking about the public transport challenge that we were fortunate enough to be able to take part of. Local councillors Paul and Sharon. So we partnered with the Howick and Pakuranga Community Patrol, and we travelled to Mangere and Henderson work destinations just to see what travelling to those destinations was like on public transport. And again, thank you for letting us take part in this challenge, and we really enjoyed working with the councillors, and we welcome the continuation of consulting with youth on public transport issues, and especially consulting them in a meaningful manner. So looking not just at work routes, but also looking at, for example, university routes or routes that students take to go to school.
Awesome. So we'd also like to talk about some broader transport issues that we've identified in East Auckland. The first of those is obviously the higher fares, which I know several councillors spoke out about and criticised. So we particularly want to highlight that youth are heavily impacted by this change. Many young people often operate on tight budgets and therefore don't have enough money to afford, have limited funds to afford their transport into university or to wherever they need to go. So by raising fares, that's putting further pressure on young people and making public transport less accessible for them. So in our work as the Howick Youth Council and talking to youth on our council and the community, there's definitely been an issue identified with that cost of public transport and the fact that increasing fare prices won't help that. So we'd like to support the stance of many of the councillors in saying that that's bad and that it's going to further damage the processes and work to encourage more young people particularly to take public transport. We also have some other broader issues that we've identified with public transport in the community. Firstly, in East Auckland, we have a number of parts of the area that are still inaccessible from public transport as a result of the new network that was implemented last year, particularly around Bucklands Beach, Howick and Cockle Bay. It's taking young people and all public transport users a long time to actually get to a bus stop. Secondly, the train issue. So we still have not high-frequency train networks running on the eastern line, which is the one through Panmure. So that's something we're concerned about. And then thirdly, overcrowding on some key routes, the 70 and the 72 in our area. But going back to what Jack said, we think that while there is plenty of issues and plenty of challenges with public transport, the key thing is consulting with the community, and the Auckland Transport communicates with the community when they put in place a new project like the T2 lane or when making decisions around public transport in East Auckland. We were concerned when we saw that the T2 lane being implemented without that consultation, because there wasn't an opportunity for the community, and particularly young people who have a vested interest in public transport, to have their say. So we are asking the council today to continue to highlight to Auckland Transport the importance of consultation and potentially look into how there can be greater consultation done around the T2 lane that is being implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben and team. That's terrific. Just on the T2 bus lane, I'm recommending that members pass a motion acknowledging the Howick Youth Council and refer their submission, and I'll ask Councillor Stewart and Councillor Young to move and second that, to refer it to Auckland Transport for their investigation and advice back to us. And I think a memo back to us is appropriate. And just on the fare issue, thank you for raising that. And yes, the Mayor, myself and Councillor Hills have written to the Minister on that particular issue, and you'll see that outgoing letter and the Minister's response attached to this agenda actually in the information section. And on the train frequency, we've just got notification after public feedback the regional public transport plan has now been confirmed. So if you can maybe look at that and just see what the final frequencies are going forward for the next few years. Questions, please. Stewart.
Oh, thank you. First of all, I'd just like to thank you for doing what you've done. It's echoing as somebody, you've got your one still on. Yeah, sorry. Oh, seems to be, I've got an echoing one. I want to thank you for doing what you did. And yes, Councillor Young and I, we approached you and the community patrollers. So we thought we'd get a young and an older set of people to go and experience what it would be like to catch public transport in a real situation, getting to work. And unfortunately, it was still a holiday time, so it wasn't quite what. Maybe we could do it again later on. I'd like to try it again if we could. But, you know, in the real world, a lot of people have to catch up to 3 to 4 forms of public transport to get to work. And so it was quite interesting. The one that I really wanted to test out was one that's quite close to home, which is in Penrose, which is the Noel Lemming one, so we'll get you to test that sometime. And, you know, what would take 15 minutes in a car can probably take you a couple of hours in a bus, you know, and so that's something. But on the consultation, it's really good that you've been out there for the consultation. And as you're aware, Simeon Brown actually had an evening where he had consultation, and the mood of the people at that consultation, it was like a full house, was definitely, they were very concerned about the bus lane and the T2, which will be coming at us on the 18th of April. So that's a really big test for Auckland Transport. And the mood of the meeting was that if there are problems with it, could it be changed back? And I think that needs to be looked at, because Pakarangi Road, as everybody knows, is one of the busiest roads in New Zealand. If it was a highway, it would be the 4th busiest highway in New Zealand. And Pakarangi Road has so many streets that come out onto Pakarangi Road that I think even the designers, and I think Auckland Transport that were there, were actually listening, and they actually asked me for me to get some of the people that were there to talk to them a bit later on about it, because they were really concerned about how people coming out of Gossamer Drive and other roads, how they'd actually be able to get through the T2. Just one other thing, and then perhaps Councillor Young might like to have something to say, but another little project I'd really love for you to do is...
If we could maybe just ask them a question, because at this stage it's most important to get some feedback from the Youth Council.
All right. Well, would you be happy to stand out 6 o'clock in the morning, 2 or 3 mornings 1 week, just to see how many T2s? And I think you'll find there's only, the other day I was there for a couple of hours and there was only 1 T2, and it happened to be Councillor Young and his daughter. He was taking her to university. So everybody was T1s, because most people, are you aware, most people actually work at the airport or in Onehunga, Avondale, Papakura, all over. Not so many actually work in the CBD. Thank you.
Awesome. Firstly, in terms of the concerns that were expressed in the meeting, definitely that's why we think we need more consultation. In terms of the time concerns, there was modelling done by Mott McDermott, which showed that there would be increases in time taken due to amity work, and that there will be a net benefit for both car users and public transport users as a result of the T2 lane. But those concerns around turning in from Cascades and Gossamer Road onto Pakarangi Road was raised, and we hope that AT will consult and will be able to resolve those. In terms of the counting the number of T2 users, Mott McDermott also did modelling on that and did some research and stood out there and counted cars. They found that 87% of vehicles were T1 and 13% were T2 or T3. So 75% of people were single occupant vehicles, and 25% of users of Pakuranga Road were in T2 or T3 vehicles.
Thank you, Ben. Councillor Cashmore, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Good presentation, guys. Well done. And we'd love to hear from the new users of our PT networks. The specific issue you're talking about is the time of connecting from your home to the bus network and vice versa going back. Have you done any research into the smart cities transporting network on that first last mile kilometre where it's been done trial through Asia, particularly out of Singapore?
I'm not sure. I don't think we're aware specifically of that work, but certainly we compared with the new transport link, the concern was that there were a number of routes that went through those areas that we talked about, which were removed because of the changing of the model, the idea that because you've got high frequency between key hubs, then that's okay if it takes slightly longer. The concern is that there are definitely that some of those links that do run through don't go to useful places. So we have a lot of transport networks that focus on a lot of our links in those areas that go into Half Moon Bay, but there are still large parts of our community that can't afford the cost of a ferry or don't want to take the ferry into the city, and so then have to get more buses linking through to Botany and on. So that's accessibility in the broader sense of where those routes are going, as well as the time taken to get to bus stops.
I'd really encourage you to have a look at that first last mile work out of Singapore, because I think it might be a partial solution for your area.
Councillor Collins, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's me.
Oh, you're all speaking too.
Very squeaky at this end on our mics. Just a couple of questions, please, Chair. Firstly, congratulations. I love it when young people come and present to our committees, and I think it takes a bit of a step. And so well done, because I think it shows real courage, and you're speaking on behalf of your youth council, so welcome. And Ben, I know personally, Mr. Chair, so Ben, good to see you. I just had a couple of questions. My first one was, as the liaison to the youth panel, would you be interested in presenting to the youth panel or giving us your submission, because many of the things you talked about run in alignment with where the youth panel was sitting?
Yeah, absolutely, that would be awesome.
First, my other question was slightly broader, and I'm just interested in your reflections on it, and that is, I get the impression that the work that you're undertaking is an attempt to maybe bridge the gap between expectations of public transport, between maybe my lived experience, which was always in a car, and out south we do depend a lot on the cars, and those who are maybe young people or young families who are trying to become higher users of public transport. You up to the challenge of helping to bridge that gap of expectations? Because I think that's where you're leading to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely a part of what we're trying to do. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. Councillor Hills, please.
Thank you. Whoa. Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for coming in and speaking to us. As Councillor Collins and others have said, it's good to have some younger people in presenting to us. Yeah, I'm lucky in my area to have a T3 lane, so I can get to work in 28 minutes on the bus from Glenfield, due to the T3 lane we've had for 30 years, I think, and about 70% of humans in that corridor are travelling down the T3 at peak, and that's obviously because you've got an incentive to get the bus or T3. So obviously, I haven't experienced the Pakuranga issues you guys are facing, but I guess what is the experience you're having right now in the bus? Are you basically just stuck in the normal traffic, so you're just like anyone else? Is that kind of why you're back in the T2?
Yeah, I took the bus here this morning, and you get onto Pakuranga Road, and then there's a significant delay because you're stuck in traffic just like any other vehicle. So obviously when you want to decrease travel times on public transport to incentivise more people to use it, being stuck in traffic and being essentially just like any other car is really bad, and it significantly increases travel times, because once you get past Pakuranga, the rest of the networks has its issues, but it's broadly okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to echo in more ways than one, the comments from my colleagues around welcome, and it's great to see you presenting. Look, my question is actually around what we put up for Resolution B. So what you've presented that you actually want us to, want Auckland Transport to seriously look at this T2, right? And yet what we're actually saying in B is that we're referring you to Auckland Transport for their consideration. My question is, would you prefer us not to ask them to consider it? We're asking them to do it.
They are doing it on the 18th April.
Right.
Yes.
So I just wondered if resolution B was then
They're
reflective
not
of
even going to listen to us.
whether resolution B reflected.
So just if I can say, Auckland Transport are looking at considerable number of kilometres of road space reallocation at the moment. So this sits with the work streams that they've got underway, and I think by referring it there and for us to get some feedback on how they considered it and possibly intend to take action, we'll hear likely a positive response.
Yeah, we're here to present the consultation, but we also want to reflect the facts of those results. So 70% in favour based on our consultation. There are definitely some strong positives for it, as we've talked about around the benefits of the public transport network. However, as Councillor Stewart raised, and as was raised at the public meeting, there definitely are some concerns around specific parts of the T2 lane and how it works. So broadly doing some more consultation on those particular issues to support it and to increase public support would be beneficial. But as part of the broader public transport network, the modelling that's been done indicates it will be positive.
Can I just take that a bit further? Councillor Simpson, would you like to have a more affirmative expression of the Planning Committee's position in that resolution? I'm happy to test that.
Yeah, well, that was my question to the presenters actually. I've got Councillor Stewart, who obviously knows this issue more than I, so I was actually just trying to.
Yeah, I need your microphone, please.
Is that better?
Yeah.
So I was asking the presenters whether they felt B reflected what they wanted to achieve or whether they would like it worded slightly differently.
Ben.
We want our consultation heard by public transport. I think that our discussion is that we're comfortable with that wording. We hope that if Auckland Transport look at our consultation and do a bit more work around some of the issues that have been identified, that then they'd be able to make adjustments and clearly show that there's public support and then be able to action it. But for the purposes of what we want to do, which is represent the voice of youth in our community, we're happy with just the consultation that we've done, the positive sentiment that's been expressed through that being shared with Auckland Transport. We don't want to take a position on it.
And finally, Councillor Bartley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. Thank you for your presentation. Really good to hear from all of you. I wanted to know why you're not taking a position on it and whether you will, because your voice is very important. And, you know, you're either for something or against it. So really want to know why. Thank you.
So we're a youth group in the community. We've been doing, the consultation shows that there is strong support, but there's not overwhelming support. There's not absolute support. And for us, our priority is representing young people's voices. And but that doesn't involve taking a big stand trying to say that this is the absolutely the only way that we can do that. We want to, by doing that consultation, show what you think, share that with you guys, and then hope that you can use that information to take positions as elected politicians and stand by them. We don't think that as our role as just representatives of the community that that's within our mandate to take a position like that.
And finally, Councillor Young.
Thank you very much, through the Chair. Actually, every day we have more than 50,000 cars in the Pakuranga. And the research sample you got is 97's research. And I think last week we have a public meeting, and actually looks like the majority actually against the T2. And so I would like to, AT can have a more consultation or research for the local public. And I think that's quite important, but thank you very much for you guys coming here. And the other thing is the T2, my experience, for example, like Birkenhead to the motorway to the city, the T3 line actually rides through the motorway, but the Pakuranga road is slightly different. We're talking about T2, but it's not a ride through the whole whole line T2. That's piece by piece. So that will be traffic. Even we are talking about T2, but actually just only part of the Pakwanga Road. I think that the AT need to do more research and then before the starting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Young. And it's moved by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Young. And on behalf of all us, Ben and Jack and Ira, thank you so much for coming in. And please convey that to your whole council. It's great to see you, and I echo what Councillor Collins and Councillor Bartley offered to you here today in the acknowledgement. Thank you. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Takes us to the next public import, which is from the Auckland Community Housing Providers Network, and it relates to the item on our agenda on page 395. No, I don't think it's 395.
Yeah, it is.
No.
The attachments are there.
The presentation is there, but it relates to the 8 and 9. I think 8 and 9 actually, maybe predominantly 9. So welcome to Hope Simonson and Dominic Foote and David Zussman from the network. And in your hands. If we could just activate that, just.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. My name's Hope Simonson from the Auckland Community Housing Provider Network, and I'm also the National Housing Manager for Emerge Aotearoa. I'd like to introduce my colleagues today, Dominic Foote from the New Zealand Housing Foundation and David Zussman from Community Housing Aotearoa. We also have representatives here today with us from Court Community Housing and Bays Community Housing Trust. I'd like to firstly thank you for the opportunity to come and present today on this very important issue. I'd like to start a little bit controversially, if you like, by describing who is delivering affordable housing in Auckland, and we don't actually think anyone is. So we've got, Housing New Zealand with the Hobsonville Land Company are really looking at social housing with Kiwi Build opportunities there. Kiwi Build is providing affordable housing for those earning more than 120,000, so we don't consider that to be that affordable. The government's Crown Land program requires developers to build social housing, and effectively that's not delivering affordable housing. The private sector isn't, and currently Auckland Council isn't either. The network is made up of 20 organisations across Auckland, and many of them have been around for over 30 years. And effectively we think that the Auckland Community Housing Provider Network members are the only organisations that are delivering affordable housing. By their very nature, they provide affordable rental and home ownership, and they are independent, not-for-profit. They provide affordable housing that's retained. Whoops, sorry, I'll go back to that one. You were right. And any gain that is made, or any surplus that is made, is poured back into more housing. They provide support services so households can sustain housing. They're community-driven. Housing that is provided is blind tenure, integrated and inclusive. They are also regulated by the government, and we have natural partners out in the sector. We clearly define affordable as what the household can afford. We don't define it as a discount to market. So it's really about what the household can afford. We don't think affordability will be solved by setting housing supply targets. We think that housing supply targets really align with housing demand. And we think that focusing solely on new housing numbers in existing communities really results in communities being forcibly changed and socially cleansed. So we think that the need for affordable housing exists because of government and council policy settings. We've got some really clear examples of what other councils are delivering around the country. Christchurch City, Wellington City and Queenstown Lakes District Council are 3 councils that are delivering clear support for affordable housing through grants, through rebates, through fast-tracking planning and through making land available. And these are things that have been done for over a period of time, and they're making a really clear impact on affordable housing for these cities. I'll hand over to Dominic.
So we're here because Council's going to be reviewing, debating and making a decision on the affordable housing policy paper that's going to be presented by officers later. We've looked at that and we think it basically aligns to a lot of what we're going to suggest that we think Council should focus on, but I do want to go through what we think the priorities for Council should be. So firstly, and this sits in your option 4, not option 3 that officers are recommending. So option 4 says that can council use existing land? There is a really good example. Council over the last few years has actually sold land at favourable rates, market price land, but it's been sold favourably to community housing providers. The most recent ones being Barraclough Place in Manukau. 300 affordable homes will be delivered on there, partnership with community housing providers, working with iwi to deliver a mixed tenure, integrated, blind tenure community. And it's happening during the middle of a slowdown in the Auckland housing market. And Barraclough, or as it's known as Punuri Place, is actually part of the Transform Manukau programme of work that Panuku has identified as being important for the regeneration of Manukau. Now, if that had been sold into the private sector, I don't know what the land price would have been, but I'd almost guarantee for now that work wouldn't be happening. It is happening, it's going forward. House construction, we got resource consent last week, thank you. We aim to start building our first houses in July, August, and have the first families in there at the end of this year. And as I said, this is an affordable housing programme. It's aimed at local people, it's aimed at key workers. We've got 6 police officers from County Manukau Police Service in the first block of 20 houses coming over. This is providing housing for families and for communities who actually are not able to access affordable housing in Manukau. I don't know what to say about inclusionary zoning. I've said it before when I presented to council. It was a missed opportunity. The opportunity is in front of us again. It is worth taking. Done and applied properly, it doesn't have an impact on developers. It has an impact on the land price that developers pay for it, but it doesn't have an impact on developers. We work with developers, the Housing Foundation and other community housing providers work with developers in providing affordable housing in land that was designated for integrated inclusionary zoning under the Special Housing Action Zone. It's a brilliant way for getting families who are disadvantaged into new housing. Yeah, okay. This is probably not something that you want to hear too often, but your fees, development contributions, they do have a significant impact on affordability. Community housing sector cannot just raise the price of a house when it sells it into the market to recover the cost of contributions or fees. We can't. We have to soak those additional costs out through our own reserves. That's not economically sustainable, it's not financially sustainable, and what it means that we end up reducing the number of houses that we can deliver. So when we talk about inclusionary zoning, talk about affordable housing, it's been done. Waimauhia was the last major affordable housing development done in Auckland. 295 houses, couldn't have done it without the support of local and central government. Your partnership was crucial to getting this across the line. It worked. Very quickly, we've just done a review of what families feel themselves about living in Waimauhia. I think those stats speak for themselves. 81% of the households feel that their quality of life has improved since moving there. Basically, 78% have seen a significant improvement in health since moving there. 84% of the families living there feel there is a sense of community. Now, Waimauhia is a mix of private housing, market housing, community housing, social rental housing. It covers the whole sphere of continuum of housing. When we ask families to name words that actually impacted on them, you'll notice that there is nothing about affordability in those words. It's development that has actually delivered something that works for housing, for households. So what does this mean for us? This means basically that as far as we're concerned, communities should always be at the centre of decision making. So when you do consider what options you want to consider for affordable housing, think about the community that you want to leave behind when you build those houses. We don't believe the government's approach to housing and redevelopment of Mangere, Otara, Mount Roskill, Northcote actually is going to drive the communities that Auckland needs in the future. We know that affordable housing isn't being delivered by the private sector and by government alone. We know that Auckland Council has the ability to be proactive. it can use its land, it can introduce inclusionary zoning, it can make a real material difference. But of course, it's a slow moving good. You can't put it to market in 6 days. It will take 2 years plus before you start to see change, but this is the time to actually make that change start. And that's what it's about. That's what it's about. That's what housing's about. That's what affordability is about. It's about communities and it's about people. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, just to qualify, I think, Hope, you said that it was the public sector, that is, Crown and Council wasn't delivering on affordable housing. You were not suggesting that some parts of the private sector, including iwi housing providers, were not delivering, because you've confirmed that life is good at Waimahia, where an iwi agency has delivered affordable
Absolutely.
housing.
So community and iwi providers working together in partnership have delivered affordable housing.
Thank you. Questions, please. Member Henry.
Kia ora. Thank you. Couple of questions. Your view on IMSB's kāinga report. Where do we go? Where do we go with it? Do we keep plodding on with council or trying to get them to do something, or do we throw it on the floor and saying, would you support? I mean, implementation of the kāinga report.
I think we should support it. I think that there's huge benefit in the kāinga action plan. I think the fact that it is an action plan is really encouraging, and we've been working in partnership with Brennan to help evolve that.
Just last one. Dominic, I heard you refer to option 4. Do you think that is a the council taking the lead rather than, they say, taking the lead in option 3?
Yes, I'd say that if council... So there's actually the slight disconnect. Panuku has said that when it's working with land that council owns for disposal, it will consider how it will use that land for affordable housing. And yet in option 4, so that is a leadership role in my sense. They're looking at Henderson, South Auckland, wherever in Auckland that council has land, and how can they use that for housing. That's a leadership role. When I look at options 3 and 4, there is a leadership role in option 3, that says inclusionary zoning, because that is going to be material change to how land's regulated in Auckland. But option 4 is a statement. It's an absolute statement by council that says, we're going to do something here. So I think that's leadership to me.
Thank you, Member Henare. Councillor Casey, please.
Thanks very much for coming in again. I totally agree with you that, we've missed opportunities and we continue to miss them, and I hope we don't miss them today. Those opportunities include the unitary plan and failing to vote to support retained affordable housing. Option 3, we're discussing options today. Option 3 does look into that, which is fantastic. But this is just to let you know that we are proposing a hybrid option 3, which will include increasing our own social stock of housing. Because I agree with you, as long as I've been on this council and previous councils, the issue always is whether the provision of housing is a core council function. I believe it is. So does Queenstown Lake, so does Christchurch. Wellington has always suffered from the John Banks fire sale, basically. That doctrine that was predominant then has kept filtering through. So I hope today that we have a good, honest, open debate about a hybrid model which would include us increasing our stock. My question, though, is to Hope. You mentioned social cleansing, and I wondered if you could give just any of you could give a couple of examples of how that has worked here in Auckland.
I'll take that question, Councillor. I think Tamaki is a good example of how we're seeing this happen. When Tamaki was just regulated and controlled really by Housing New Zealand, they had one focus, and that was actually just about developing land for their own housing need. And the land that they didn't need for their housing need, they put out for highest and best use. So that automatically, given its location, means proximity to Glendowie, to Mission Bay, means that they're going to attract very high land values. So that land gets redeveloped next to a house that's actually that's privately owned. that private owned property may well be rented out. The landlord of that property will look at that land and think, oh, if they can get that for that land, I can get this for mine. So I'll tip the tenant out of this house, redevelop it, and put it out for market. That actually has happened. It's happened. We've, in Waimahi, have housed families that could not afford to stay in Tamaki. We've housed them, we've put them in. They come into home ownership as well, ironically. So they've moved out and they've gone down to a place that's more affordable. Since TRC stepped in, they've done their best in Tamaki to try and address that by checking what looks like affordable housing and creating housing that is more affordable. But if you don't have those initiatives and that policy in place, everything you do through redevelopment is going to, by its very nature, increase land price, increase property price. And it's going to remove the ability for families to actually stay in that community. It happens, it happens.
And just to add to that, the community housing sector ideally looks at housing that's provided across a wider continuum. So it's not just about social housing and privately owned housing, it's about everything in the middle, so that when people are ready to move from social housing into affordable rental, into assisted ownership, they've got options to do that within the same community. It's not about having to move out of communities to have that happen.
Thank you. Member Damani, please.
Kia ora. Just a couple of questions. I noted the Waimahi example, and it was touched on by the chair. I just wondered, because two other, I understand, significant players in achieving that particular one was Te Tumu Paeroa and the Tamaki Collective, the collective of mana whenua. In fact, I understand without their involvement, I think previous attempts weren't successful. So I'm just interested in why that isn't highlighted within your presentation in the first instance. And then I guess the second point, because I think it's a success, and anybody that does a success and can collaborate is a good thing. So, and I think the second point is, because I did hear in respect to the opportunities that are available with council land, and similar to, I guess, Crown land in Auckland, subject to RFR and a mahi ngā tahi agreement between mana whenua and the government, would you support, you know, similar arrangements being made with, I guess, sometimes mana whenua consider councils a delegated authority of the Crown under the treaty, similar arrangements with mana whenua as council land passes through for that purpose. Yeah, but I was interested in why it wasn't acknowledged, the significant role that mana whenua played in Waimahia.
Probably time constraints. I could talk for half an hour about Waimahia and the reasons why it's a success. And it's true, the land would not have been made available other than through treaty settlements with Tamaki Makaru. So it happened as a result of that. Te Tumu Paeroa and their housing entity, Te Tumu Kaianga, are one of the limited partnerships in Barracliff. So we've taken the concept of delivering affordable housing for a whole range of peoples and brought that into Punui, into Barracliff. And that's a partnership that we see as enduring, absolutely enduring. It's a role. And we've partnered up in the land development works with Te Akatai to deliver a land for that they as an iwi can actually build. And we'll build probably about 120 odd properties for affordable housing in Barracliff. So we will enable, as a partnership, always to deliver housing. In terms of roles and going forward, the one principle that we as community housing providers stand by is that if council is going to use land for affordable housing, we think that land and that land should be retained for the purposes of affordable housing. Who develops it, owns it, manages it, as long as that's their kaupapa, their principle, and they're regulated by that. If it's iwi, it's iwi. If it's hapu, it's hapu. If it's a community housing provider, which is Te Tumu Kaianga as well, then it's them. But I think council has to be clear about its mandate for affordability and why it's doing it. Otherwise, you'll lose that land to the private sector.
Kia ora, Dominic. And Councillor Newman, please.
Yeah, thank you. I agreed with a lot of what you said in your presentation, but I'm not sure I agree with you in relation to development contributions, whether it is a private development or the state or it's an affordable housing project. The demand for utility infrastructure remains, the stormwater, the need for connections to wastewater services, transport infrastructure, and community infrastructure. So, am I to understand, what is your preferred approach to development contributions? I mean, are you wanting a partial or full exemption in order to reduce the development costs? Because the only way that I can see that being achieved is to, in effect, socialise that cost so that someone else picks it up. Who picks up the cost?
So we take a slightly different view on development contributions. We acknowledge Auckland's growing, and that the demand on Auckland services will be consistently grow. But that demand for their services is going to grow regardless of whether you've got two families in one house or two families in two houses. The demand for facilities is going to be the same. So what happens is that we're penalised by producing a house that's affordable for the family that's doubling up with someone else, to get them out of that doubling, crowding situation into their own home. Their draw-on services is actually not that much different. It is not that different. It's what you're seeing is just greater connections to a system in terms of stormwater, wastewater, and potable water, or access to community services. They're going to happen anyway. The amount of water that passes through pipes doesn't increase or decrease by the number of people in the house. It stays the same. You take those families out and put them into a second house. The demand is the same. What we're saying is that we are the only organisation that delivers houses that we cannot reclaim the cost of those development contributions from sale or through the government. Housing New Zealand gets subsidised by the Crown for doing this. We don't. Ideally, we'd love to get full rebate on DCs. Practically, we know that's not achievable. But for our DCs to go up $10,000 a house as a result of the change in policy on the 1st of January, we have no provision for that. And we stood here in October and told you that this is going to hurt us. It is hurting us.
Continuing, carrying on.
So, yeah. I do have a lingering concern, though, that there is a development impact of these houses, and that does need to be picked up somewhere. So you can carry part of it, but you can't carry all of it. And therefore, who does pick up that other cost? Because it has to be picked up somewhere.
Can I answer that? So Christchurch City Council has provided a grant program for development contributions. That's one simple way of doing it. It's not long lasting, but it is a simple way of doing it, where charitable and community organisations are able to apply to that grant program. And Hutt City did it for 2 years, just to increase the number of houses that were being built in the hut for key workers. So there are I guess examples of different councils around the country that have managed to look at ways of providing some kind of subsidy in the form of development contribution.
Thank you. Now I've got two more members who would like to ask questions. I'd like to close it off there because we've got a long way to go in the public forum and the whole of the meeting. Councillor Bartley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. Thank you for your presentation. I absolutely agree with your comments about social cleansing and what's happened in Tamaki. And note that, council is 49% shareholder of Tamaki Regeneration, what's happening there. I wanted to ask you if you're concerned about the other HLC developments throughout Auckland, in particular in Mangere, and whether you see the same issues that happen in Tamaki will likely happen in Mangere.
I think at the moment, the way that the designs for Mangere are looking, that there still isn't any evidence that they're looking at housing across that continuum, and that's concerning. So there is still no real evidence to say that they're looking at affordable rentals and assisted ownership options in and amongst social housing Kiwi build and private ownership. There's still a big gap in there. And I think what happens is that people who aren't, or who actually start to do better in their lives and no longer need social housing have nowhere to go. And I think that it has the potential to happen in Mangere.
Finally, Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one quick question, probably picking up on the regulatory costs on council that the council imposes. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the latest annual plan proposal, but there's increases in consenting costs there. If you've had the chance to digest that, and if you're going to make any comment or submission on what that might be, if you'd like to share that with us.
I guess in short, we haven't reviewed them yet. It's just, as I said, in a sense, it's almost like a regressive tax, because every time a dollar goes up as a cost, we don't have the ability to claim that cost back. We accept that costs go up, absolutely, we accept it, but it's the proportionality of those costs and where they sit that's our concern. And also the reality is that we deliver very few houses per annum based on current policy settings. It's not many at all. So we work on the principle the cost is actually very low, the benefit is significant, but every time that fees change, yeah, it is going to hurt us. But we will be submitting on that.
Thank you. Hope and Dominic and David, look, thank you very much for your the material that you've conveyed to us today. It's invaluable. It's been invaluable to date, and I'm sure it's going to be an invaluable relationship going forward. Massive challenge for Auckland. It's not going to be resolved any quick way. We're going to have to be really smart about this, but we're going to have to apply ourselves, and I know you know that as well, and hence your contributions from your 20 organisations, and please take the support that I think you're sensing here today back to your network of your 20 organisations, them all. Thank you for the information on Waimahi. I've never seen that data on the quality of life improvement and health improvements. That's never come forward to us. So that's testimony to what can be achieved. And as our IMSB members outlined, that's iwi leadership in Auckland, which is delivering affordability and quality of life that's got to be delivered right across Auckland. So thank you. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Casey, Councillor Bartley, thank you. Moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Thank you. Yep. Thank you. So if we can now move to the parties that have an interest in our approach to marinas, speaking to that topic. If all the parties could come up, and I'm sure we'll be able to squeeze you. There's a couple of spare seats to your right. And now we've got the Northern Reclamation Yacht Clubs Working Group, and that's, I think, 3 parties. Tony, you'll just tell us who that is. Tony Skelton and Ron Copeland representing that group. We've got Robert Alsip Smith from the Berth Holders Association up at Gulf Harbour. And Richard Steele, who we've received before on a few occasions from the Auckland Marinas Users Association, June Kearney from the West Harbour Residents Group, and then I'll come to and have distributed the letter from Shearer Consulting. Tony, you were the first to email in, so maybe if we allow you. Now, if we could, we could find ourselves repeating various things, but so Tony, in some ways, you have the advantage of leading off, and we'll just take you each one at a time. In your court to begin with, Tony. Can you activate that? Just show, if it shows red.
Yep, got it. I've got it now. Good morning, and thank you for allowing us to present to you this morning. My name is Tony Skelton, and I'm representing the Northern Reclamation Yacht Club Working Group, which I'll refer to as NRY. I'm also representing the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron, which is a party to this group. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip the very first page of my submission, but draw your attention to the very last paragraph. My focus is on Westhaven, obviously, There is a conflict with the role of Panuku being a fully ratepayer capitalised property development company on the one hand and being the Westhaven Marina manager on the other. And this is an unacceptable conflict of interest. By 2026, the berth licences will mostly have all expired. Currently over 50% have done so. The seabed licence in Westhaven expires in 2026. Clearly, Panuku's agenda is to forestall the implementation of any long-term sustainable strategic plan until the berth holder licences have expired. Panuku is confusing the issue by telling you, the councillors, that there is a strategic plan for Westhaven Marina. There is not. And I refer you to the minutes of a board meeting of Panuku dated the 30th of May. 3.5 section is where it is. They have an operational development plan, which is quite different from a strategic development plan. The NYA fully support the AUMA and their proposal for Auckland Council to adopt a fact issue-based approach to the development of a strategic plan in Westhaven. The NRY does not support the Planning Committee's proposal for a principles-based strategy. On the 5th of February, NRY made a submission to every single councillor with a proposal for Westhaven to be put into a charitable trust and to be considered on the 20th of February. We were refused access to that workshop. It is of real concern to NRY that the decision made by councillors at the workshop on the 20th of February decided to adopt a principle-based approach to the Auckland Marina Plan. A principles-based strategy is in this case totally inadequate to meet the objectives of developing an overarching plan encompassing all Auckland marinas. If Auckland Council is genuine in developing and wishing to develop and adopt a marina plan, then with due respect to the council officers involved, the only methodology that can be adopted to meet this goal is the 6-point fact and issue-based plan that has been put to you by AUMA. This is Planning 101. The principles-based approach is not. To add insult to injury, the process of leaving Westhaven, the largest marina in the Southern Hemisphere, off the proposed principles plan is completely unacceptable. For the record, NRY have on 3 separate occasions, namely, and they're in this document, have had meetings with Panuku to address this very real issue. The big, singular and most important issue confronting Westhaven is the complete lack of tenure for every member of the NRY. The yacht clubs have considerable capital tied up in the ownership of their clubhouse buildings. Without security of tenure, these investments are at considerable risk. We are at a point, in our opinion, that Panuku should be subjected immediately to a review under Section 17A of the Local Government Act. It has become very apparent that Auckland Council's mandate from Panuku to develop an 8% return on their capital is unsustainable. In conclusion, we strongly request that this committee adopt a motion that directs the Council to form a steering committee that involves the key stakeholders from all marinas, council and private. To be effective, the marina plan has to be driven on the information supplied by the stakeholders in these marinas. We believe the goodwill is there to anticipate this process. However, there has to be a paradigm shift in the attitude on the part of council officers, hence the request for an instruction. Without wishing to appear patronising, councillors are elected to represent the views and the wishes of ratepayers. That means listening and taking on board their requests and actioning them accordingly. We urge you at today's meeting to reject the principles-based marina strategy proposal and instead adopt the original AMUA issues fact-based marina strategy as presented to you in September 2018.
Thank you, Tony. I think what we'll do is we'll hear from all the groups and then we'll take questions. Robert Allsop-Smith from... Sorry? Oh, Ron Copeland. Ron. Now, Ron, you're representing the same group as Tony.
And Ponsonby Cruising Club and my family.
Okay, they're additional. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ron Copeland. I represent Ponsonby Cruising Club, the Northern Reclamation Combined Yacht Clubs and my family, who have been involved in various ways with running Westhaven from 1940s to 1980s. I've been a member of PCC for 55 years, serving on management for over 20 years, Commodore for 7 years and am a life member. Ponsonby Cruising Club is the oldest club in Westhaven, having been there for 119 years. In the early 1930s, we started teaching children to sail, and we're actually building P classes within the club and still run a sailing school to this day, which is used by children from all over Auckland, including underprivileged children who are sponsored by members. During my time as Commodore, I was a board member on the Westhaven Marina Trust Board. I was also responsible for meeting with Mayor John Banks, government officials, to fuel an idea of returning Westhaven back to public ownership. Mayor Banks negotiated with Helen Clark's government and the marina was passed on to Auckland Council at a discounted price. I own a marina at Gulf Harbour and have been involved in current land issues, and I'm also familiar with Bayswater Marina, having lived in the area for 50 years and aware of the ongoing change of zoning issues. At the Planning Committee, Council Planning Committee, 4th of September 2018, it was my clear understanding that a resolution was passed that workshops needed to be held with all stakeholders so that all councillors could be informed of relevant issues in order to formulate a marina strategy. We understand 3 meetings have been held, and we have written to the council 3 times asking to be allowed to put input into the workshops, and we are not aware of any stakeholders being asked for that input. This is against the original intent. Why the rejection? Councillors here today, councillors are here today to have the Marina Principles, not Marina Strategy document prepared by council staff without any public consultation or stakeholder input, tabled to be accepted or declined. This is contrary to the council resolution of 4th of September, where the Mayor said it was better to be thorough than to be rushed, and that the public should be involved, as council needed to get this decision right, and it takes as long as necessary with no time frame. The overhead projection there is from the Marine Industries Association. There's a lot more to these documents, but this shows the increase of trailer boat sales and also boat sales, and there's another ongoing thing. 39% of all the boats sold in Auckland, in New Zealand, are in Auckland. So the massive amount of demand on our marine facilities is increasing year by year. Where do we get to? Sorry. I'd like to table a memory stick containing documents prepared by Janet Watkins for the Auckland Yachting and Boating Association and for Active, which I encourage you all to look at, as is an in-depth analysis of the use and future needs of marine facilities. This work took her a year to compile and should form a framework for any future-proofing marine facilities and strategic planning. Janet is a long-standing PCC member and representative on the AYBA and Yachting New Zealand. I would like to table this to the council and encourage anybody, any of your members that are in doubt that what we are trying to do here is preserve and maintain marine facilities and stop them being sold, manipulated, and have apartments built on them. And anyone that's in doubt that this is a small group of people trying to stir, that is not the case. And this is an in-depth analysis of the situation, which if the council commissioned it would cost an awful lot of money to produce. So it's a very valuable document to have a look at. We believe that all marinas should be classed as strategic assets, tying in with transport hubs. In our opinion, Panaku Developments is out of control, not representing the council in a positive light when it comes to maintaining and future-proofing valuable public assets. These assets have been entrusted to you for the enhancement of our city. All of our marinas have government empowering acts which developers must adhere to. However, these empowering acts and environment court decisions are and have been manipulated by developers and council. Recommendation: PCC and the Northern Reclamation Yacht Clubs do not support the adoption of the Marina Principles document in its present form. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron. In June.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Mayor Goff, Councillor Chair Darby and councillors. We've been asked not to repeat anything which has been presented to council before. And within that limitation, I'll address some matters previously raised in the context of the approach to marinas agenda item. But I would ask for some leniency in that regard because relevant issues remain unaddressed. We support the AMUA and other submitters today, but we are speaking only for West Park Marina, and we have serious concerns about the approach to marinas. First, there is no mention of the West Harbour Empowering Act, with both the unitary plan and now this document providing for residential development in breach of that act. 3 legal opinions are in accord as to that breach, including Panuku's own. That breach in the plan, regardless of ongoing community and legal objection, is reinforced here by principles apparently designed to support residential development of West Park. Firstly, a principle which creates opportunities for connected and accessible new housing development. No mention of the Regional Coastal Plan or the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement. West Park Marina is a boat harbour, not a subdivision. Secondly, hypothetical level 2 principles include an unobstructed boardwalk along the entire water's edge, coincidentally a component of Hobsonville Marina Limited's apartment development as a sop to the unobstructed public access required by the Act. What a strangely specific principle. The hypothetical level 2 principles for future public transport interchange at West Park are all achievable without unnecessary housing development which serves only the developer and Panuku. There is no impediment to Transport Auckland making informed decisions other than the relentless pursuit of a sale by Panuku to their client, Hobsonville Marina Limited, in what has been described as an unusually close collaboration. Paragraph 453 states, delaying all decisions on marinas poses a risk, particularly for Panuku and Auckland Transport, as there are current issues that need to be dealt with. The risk to Panuku would seem to consist entirely of obstruction to their commitment to the sale of West Park. The risk to the would-be developer that what seemed like a done deal at a minimal cost of 2 to 5 million has been derailed, and the public exposure has drawn attention to the Empowering Act. The only risk to Auckland Transport is those issues remaining unresolved by Council. Other risks. It is established by the 3 legal opinions without reserve that the Empowering Act would need to be repealed to permit residential development on West Park. Panuku and HML proposed this to Council's Finance Committee, asking for Council's assistance to do so. Panuku states in its report to the Board in May 2018 that, quote, to enable apartment development on West Park, Council would need to address the restriction of the 1979 Act. The legislative impediment is well recognised. Why is it not recognised by this Council, or the Unitary Plan, or this Marina Strategy? How much more money will it take from the West Harbour community to convince councillors of the legal requirement to uphold the statute? Is $10,000 to date enough? Or are we in the famous delay, deny until they die scenario? This increased potential to misuse Council's strategic direction in an attempt to amend or repeal the Act cannot remain unchallenged. HML proposed building up to 250 apartments on the prime waterfront of West Park and claimed that without the interference of independent planner Robert Scott's evidence, subsequently withdrawn, the potential existed for 600 apartments. We request an unequivocal answer as to whether this Council supports an attack on the Empowering Act to achieve connected and accessible new housing, because that is what it would take. A plan change for West Park is imperative. The only framework required is the Empowering Act, the Regional Coastal Plan, and the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement, certainly not a strategy engineered to a preconceived outcome. We look to this committee and council as a whole to resolve the issues raised without further delay, obfuscation or diversion. We cannot repeat ourselves ad infinitum. Who amongst you is prepared to continue to defend the indefensible? Thank you.
Thank you, June. I think we'll go up to Gulf Harbour now with Robert.
Thank you. Good morning, councillors. I'm Robert Alsop-Smith, representing Gulf Harbour Berth Holders Association.
Robert, could you activate your mic there, please?
Sorry. I'm aware that to most councillors, the issue of marinas may be seen as a group of disgruntled rich boaties who want to protect their interest. This is far from the truth, so far that it's laughable. Sure, there are some wealthy boaties, as in any sport or interest, but the majority are normal, hard-working, ordinary people whose concern is far deeper than self-interest. There is every appearance that the whole planning process is a sham, as nothing has changed. Surely council's primary role is to represent the will of the people. Isn't that what we elected you to do? So the first step must be to consult all stakeholders. It's only once issues have been identified that strategy or planning can be undertaken to address those issues. The current situation sees council abrogating that responsibility to others who are not elected. The planning committee is not making decisions. It's being asked to rubber stamp someone else's agenda. You have not been given a group of options to consider. Simply, please endorse our proposal without any background information to compare. Turning to the proposal, you are going to be asked to endorse specifically the area what principles won't do. It won't project future demand. Surely that one topic alone is what council is all about and should be a high priority. The second, in-depth analysis of issues and demand projections. How can you develop a strategy without this information? And the third omission is it won't provide any detailed planning or investments for each or any marina. Again, this is surely vital to any strategy plan, with the exception of the investment, because until a planned strategy is determined, investment, if any, can't be quantified. Marinas are different to the other assets of council because they can't be reproduced if council gets this wrong. It's then wrong for all time. Parks or stadium, as an example, could be replaced. Marinas can't. As council has demonstrated in the past, getting the process wrong becomes a major embarrassment, doing credit to no one. Specifically, the debacle with the stadia shuffle, which council proposed prior to discussion and buy-in by those activities using each at the time. That was followed by the similar situation with the Takapuna car park development, a proposal for a developer's benefit without local stakeholder involvement. Nelson Council got it wrong and had to do a major rethink once they involved all stakeholders, resulting in a change of direction, but one everyone could accept in the end. Please learn from others' mistakes. Referring specifically to Gulf Harbour, there is every indication that external pressure is being applied to council without councillors being provided all facts and information. Do you know that the relevant Empowering Act specifies the land ownership of the reclaimed seabed is held by a corporate? That corporate being the chairman and councillors of Rodney, now Auckland, and the residents of Rodney. When were any of the residents of Rodney ever consulted about the proposed land sale? This whole marina strategy issue has come about because council does not have one. There needs to be an overarching strategy common to all marinas, with specific departures to accommodate local issues. Anything less will result in a nonsense outcome. The development of this strategy must involve all stakeholders, with the first step being the identification of issues. Surely, Council's prime responsibility is to provide a framework for growth and development of Auckland for today and into the future in an organised manner. This pushback you are seeing has come about as a result of marinas starting to be used in a manner that was never intended, at times with Council's support and help. Please take a step back and exercise true leadership. Engage in an open and inclusive process that will provide a consensus result all can live with. Time is not critical unless some secret backroom deals have been entered into. Getting this right is important. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I'll put that back on. And if you could deactivate your mic there, Robert, and I'll invite Richard. Would you like to, it's mobile, that mic, if you lift it up and bring it over, or swap seats?
Good morning, Mayor, members of the Independent Marriage Statutory Board and councillors. My name is Richard Steele and I chair the Auckland Marina Users Association, and alongside me is Ewan Little, who's our Deputy Chair. Amua's view, or the Auckland Marina Users Association view of Agenda 10, is that we've come full circle in the last 10 months. Amua opposes the recommended option 1, which is fundamentally no different to the approach we opposed on the 4th of September in 2018. And there's been no stakeholder engagement on Council's approach since that time. You might like to refer to the table on the handout that you have in front of you, which gives a summary of the timeline that relates to that 10-month comment. What triggered Amua's demand for a regional strategy for marinas was primarily Panuku's strategy, supported by Auckland Transport at that time, which was May 2018, for land transactions at West Park, Hobsonville, and also Gulf Harbour. The transactions involved transferring council-owned marina land into private ownership. Panuku also noted that the lessee at Half Moon Bay was interested in acquiring freehold title. At that time and subsequently, we have advocated strongly that there should be no sale of council-owned marina land prior to the completion of a regional marina strategy that addresses regional and local needs and issues. And at a planning committee workshop on the 22nd of August 2018, which you may recall, and following a presentation of Panuku's strategy, it was concluded that a broader strategic approach was needed that should reflect public feedback. And that's a direct quote from the paper in the 4th of September meeting. Amua's position on the need for a regional strategy is now supported by a growing number of stakeholders, and you'll have become aware of that already. Those include Auckland Yachting and Boating Association, New Zealand Marine Industry Association, the Akarana Marine Sports Charitable Trust, as well as the Northern Reclamation Yacht Clubs. And we also have today the Commodore from OBC has made himself available to come along as well. Council may not have been engaging with stakeholders, but stakeholders had been engaging with each other. As the handout entitled Full Circle shows, it's clear that Council, Panuku and Auckland Transport are persisting with an approach to marinas that is designed to enable Panuku's proposed land transactions. The report under Agenda Item 10 is a repeat of the attempt in September 2018 to provide an expedient framework to sanitise the proposed land transactions at West Park, Gulf Harbour and Half Moon Bay, and perhaps at other marinas also. Evidence lies in para 53 of Item 10, which states delaying all decisions on marinas poses a risk, particularly for Panuku and Auckland Transport, as there are current issues that need to be dealt with. What are those issues? The paper is silent. However, as para 5 of the report and item 10 notes, once council passes ownership of marina land into private ownership, the ability to influence strategic outcomes will be reduced. So why isn't council taking a wider strategic approach that reflects the public feedback you've been provided with previously and today? Council's approach is not strategic and does not reflect public feedback. We want to see a strategy that is founded in robust, democratic, evidence-based decisions, not decisions based on a set of principles that are open to wide interpretation and have no standing in the hierarchy of planning documents. In terms of your decision on this item later today, and there's a second table in the handout, which is entitled Decision on Item 10 and a Way Forward, our preference is that this committee declines option 1 and supports option 4, which is in fact founded on the letter that we've submitted on the 28th, 29th of November last year. We oppose the recommendation to adopt option 1 and oppose options 2 and 3 as alternatives because they are all solely principles based. However, we recognise that the Planning Committee may well have reservations regarding the scope, costs and timeframe to deliver option 4. But it's worth noting, as you've already heard, that stakeholders have considerable knowledge of legacy issues, regional and local issues, and extensive factual data to contribute to the process. This could minimise the timeframe and cost, and urgent issues could be prioritised in a staged approach to the strategy. None of this has been considered because Council has not engaged with stakeholders. We are not a scary bunch of radicals. Look at us all. We've got a bit of grey hair. That's the worst you could say. So please speak to us and collaborate with all stakeholders. If the committee doesn't accept option 4, we encourage this committee to consider a way forward whereby the committee directs the officers to form a steering committee involving stakeholders to look at the approach to option 4 together, and in so doing address the Panuku and AT issues as well as other stakeholder issues, and consider the available information on needs, and then report back to the committee, perhaps in May 2000 this year, with the intent that together stakeholders and council can finalise approach. So if councillors vote in favour of recommended option 1 or 2 or 3, they are in our view eroding public trust and failing as custodian and defender of community interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Now we'll take questions. Ewan, you were with Richard, and if need be, you're welcome to answer any questions. Yeah. Thank you, Ewan. Now, I've got questions, firstly from Councillor Newman, please.
Hi, June. A question for you. At para 5 in the report, the second sentence, there are council-owned parcels of land, e.g. open space for or transport-related, close brackets, associated with these marinas. So it would be your summation that after the comma should read, and these marina land parcels are subject to empowering legislation which has not been revealed and which constrains council's ability to develop and or divest. Would that be a fair summation of your position?
That all of West Park, the entire marina, is owned by council. While it's leased, it actually owns it all, basically. That's my understanding. Sorry, have I misread your question?
So if that's the case, if there were to be the development of some sort of principles or strategy document, the preamble to that should read something like that Auckland Council is a creature of statute which adheres to the intent of empowering legislation, even where that empowering legislation may be inconsistent with any existing precinct plans which have been agreed and made operative in the Auckland Unitary Plan.
Absolutely. And could I just take the advantage of mentioning very briefly that with the limited powers of general competence that council has under the Local Government Act, it's quite specific that those powers are subject to the other provisions of the Act of Acts, and the powers are also limited by other acts. And the Empowering Act is an act. Thank you.
Councillor Wayne Walker. I need a microphone, please.
Sure, they could be answered by whoever wants to make the call. So my first question is around the reach of your organisations, the membership, and further than that, the reach of how many Aucklanders you represent.
I'll attempt to answer that. As Richard has already pointed out, we've been engaging with stakeholders and people we believe to be stakeholders in the marine industry or in recreational marinas right throughout Auckland. We received an endorsement from the Auckland Yacht and Boating Association last night. They've got 19,000 members and they support our stance on the marina strategy at the moment. Now, of those 19,000 members, some of them are too young to vote, but a lot of them have two parents. So we're not talking about rich yachties here, we're talking about grassroots people who want to get out and enjoy access to the marine-related activities that they could do. And they cover everywhere. There's a list of 49 yacht clubs that I have in front of me, going from Kowau through to Mangere, Kawakawa Bay, Hauraki, Tamaki Drive, Stillwater, Tor Bay, Takapuna, Devonport, Okura, Waiti. That's just a small number. In the marinas themselves, combined membership of the marinas is around 5,000 berth holders and renters. And one of the big issues that the yacht clubs strike is the fact that they might have a membership, more than double their members use their facilities for boat haul out, for launching their boats. And so we, in involving stakeholders, we have communication plans to get to these guys at every boatyard and say, this is the plan that's coming out. We want your input into the recreational marina strategy.
Got that. The other question I've got, I think, is to Robert Alsop-Smith, and you mentioned about councillors not being given all the information. Can you give us an idea of what you're referring to? And I don't know whether that's around Gulf Harbour or somewhere else.
Yes, at this stage, specifically Gulf Harbour, but I believe it would be general over the whole lot, although we'll touch briefly on Westpark at the same time, where Panuku had a plan to use the Public Works Act to take land off itself to then sell to Mr. Herbert as a developer for these apartments, which totally overlooked the legality of the situation that where council acquires land under the Public Works Act, council is then required to carry out those works that were the justification for the use of the Public Works Act. Panuku applied for and was successful in having the Esplanade Reserve on the Hammerhead at Gulf Harbour extinguished, which defied logical belief in anybody's book, because surely council is meant to be the custodian of Esplanade Reserve. Rumour is a dangerous thing, but there was an element of fact within it. When Amur was first formed, a number of Gulf Harbour investment employees said to us, oh, you're too late, we've been told it's a done deal. Interesting, at the same time, Panuku's minutes came out on the website showing a value agreed at $9.8 million approximately for the land sale proposal at Gulf Harbour. This whole issue is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Panuku's been quite happy to circumvent legal requirements. They have legal advice from two separate occasions that specified that the Empowering Acts where they applied at marinas were sacrosanct and the land couldn't be sold. they've carried on with a land sale proposal despite their own advice telling them that to do so placed council in jeopardy of litigation. I know you've heard the word commented before that Panuku gives the impression of being a council-controlled organisation out of control. Unfortunately, there's every appearance that that is dead right, because I'm certain the bulk of councillors will not have been informed and will not be aware of the background to a lot of what's going on and the specific issues as they've arisen. You just get a report presented in front of you to accept or reject.
Robert, I need to...
Hence my earlier comments.
I think you've addressed the question.
Okay.
Councillor Walker, do you have a third question?
Very quick one, Mr. Chair, and that might be addressed to Tony. Tony, do you consider...
Microphone, please.
Sure. Do you consider that all the marinas should be classified as a strategic asset, as a network, in similar fashion to, say, our roading network, our water network, and the like?
Absolutely. Without question.
Councillor Simpson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question, I think sort of Councillor Walker's sort of answered it. You're a veritable force as a team. You've come from across the region, you've come from a number of different marinas and clubs. Is there any group that doesn't share your view? So what I'm trying to see is who's been left out of this? You know, I mean, what I'm looking at from the outside, and we're a bit lucky in Iraqi, ours are privately owned, but nevertheless, they're part of the overall, you know, region's infrastructure. But is there any marinas that you know of that don't share your views?
Not that we're aware of. Even more, I'll tell you this, that all the communities around those marinas are also supporting us as well. So we're not just talking boats, we're talking residential ratepayers and other community interests that are adjacent to or are involved with these marinas. So you're talking to a large number of people.
And just a follow-up, for those who aren't potentially, you know, boat owners or whatever, just because a marina is based in a particular ward, you can come a long way, can't you? You can drive a long way to get to wherever your boat is, you know, moored. You know, not necessarily those boats who are on the North Shore are only owned by people who live on the North Shore. Would that be an accurate statement?
That's absolutely correct. I live in St Mary's Bay and I've got a marina at Gulf Harbour.
Could I add to that?
No, so just a minute, please. Can I just ask a question here, Tony, and for all of you? You say you represent just about everybody. Marinas occupy formerly public seabed reclaimed and public seabed and the coastal edge. There's a real critical partner that no one is mentioning here, and that's the mana whenua that have an interest in the harbours. How is your representation of them?
Our engagement with stakeholders is ongoing. We have already identified probably the Kaitiaki Forum as a key group that we should talk to. We haven't yet. We have talked to the Independent Maori Statutory Board. And in our letter of November, where we put forward the approach to the strategy, we did identify a group of stakeholders, which included mana whenua. And we anticipated at that stage that council would engage with stakeholders and therefore anticipated that they would initiate that contact, but that obviously hasn't occurred. The group that already exists embraces all stakeholders, and we recognise there will be different views. All of those different views need to come to the table in a stakeholder inclusive approach to a marina strategy. That's all that we're asking.
So you're acknowledging that there are additional stakeholders to the groups that you represent?
Absolutely,
yeah.
yes.
Okay,
absolutely.
And they are important to the process going forward?
Of course they are.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Councillor Watson, please.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And I won't pursue the massive
growth and that projected growth. But what I do want to pick up on is an element that a number of you mentioned, don't particularly care who answers it, in terms of what we have before us, these draft marina principles, and you'll see the very first one there refers to new housing development. So I'm just wondering if we could perhaps, someone could make it perhaps clear to the councillors, and I'm looking at legal opinion here. I haven't seen all the legal opinions, but I have a legal opinion I have been made aware of that goes to the status of these empowering acts that created the marinas, often out of seabed and foreshore and beaches. And I wonder, given that they are not mentioned at all in our report, don't receive a single mention, I wonder how compatible you see that with and the accompanying legal advice in terms of boat harbour purposes, because I think that's what we're talking here, how consistent is our very first principle, draft marina principle, with what you have with your legal advice and what you know about the boat harbour purposes clause that goes to all our marinas.
Can I just answer that, please? Seeing I raised it. I mean, we just find ourselves, and we're a large group in West Harbour, and some of us are here in support today. We just find ourselves somewhat bemused by the fact that this keeps occurring. I mean, there are 3 legal opinions. Council has them, I believe, from Alan Webb, from Gillian Chappell, and for Panuku, from Buddle Finlay. I could talk about one that's belatedly been put forward by HML, but that would take some time, and I could just say that I find it quite lacking. So I wouldn't like to see council depend on that. I mean, I would like some direction from this council how we are to deal with this issue of the endless reference to housing on marinas in complete conflict with empowering acts designed to refuse it. I mean, it's just, at what point is somebody actually going to address it? And that's why I have asked for an unequivocal answer from this council whether you intend to attack the empowering acts, not only ours, but others, or do you intend to uphold them? It's a simple question, because if you want to do what's in that strategy, that's what you will have to do. And that's what Panuku has put before you as well. And would you please assist them to do it at the finance committee?
Wait, which strategy are you referring to? Principles?
The principles strategy. What, as Councillor Watson read out. The one he's just quoted from it. Yeah.
So can I just clarify, at the workshop, there was a page, remember, as you recall, it was headed up draft principles. And I think I and others spoke about, well, they're not draft because they're just theoretical. And I think in the paper it refers to theoretical principles. So they're indicative. It is up to the process to uncover what those principles are. They're being conveyed here in the paper as theoretical. They're not draft.
And with due respect, Mr. Chair, that's not correct. What is theoretical? With the theoretical examples is the term used. Draft marina principles is the terminology used in attachment A. And that was what I was referring to.
And that was brought up in the workshop for those that attended, and it was stressed that had to be flushed out through the process, and I think we all agreed to that. So, Councillor Bartley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your comments that we represent ratepayers. I also represent people who are not ratepayers, who don't own homes, who don't own boats, who've never been to a marina. And with pressing demands on our budgets, why should we opt for the most costly option for a marina strategy when marinas are not accessible to all, and when it seems the problem, in your words, is that Panuku is being a wolf in sheep's clothing?
I think if you study the document that Janet Watkins has done, it refers to people all over Auckland without marinas, and it's the use of the marine facilities that anyone can use. just from memory, there's over 1.5 million adults that use marine facilities. Then that can be the club facilities, haul outs, waka facilities, paddle boards, canoes, God knows what. So that document is very relevant to exactly what you're all asking here. The club's memberships and things are completely irrelevant to the use of the facilities. Not all of the people are members of the clubs, but they use the facilities, and they use the water facilities, launching ramps, all the rest of it around there. So, you know, it's not limited to people who own marinas or people who own boats, because all these facilities are such an important part of the community. So I urge you all to look at that study in depth, and it'll answer a lot of the questions that you put forward here.
Thank you, Councillor Bartley. Member Henry.
A couple of questions. When was the last time your organisation backed a Māori strategy on anything? Well, when was the last time you had an engagement with Māori?
We haven't been approached by Maori to endorse or discuss any strategies that they would like our support for, but we're not resistant.
Okay,
cool. Yeah.
Could I just add to that, Mr. Henry? I and our club have had quite extensive discussions on issues with Ngāti Whātua over the last 3 or 4 years.
So what's in it for Māori? What is in it for Māori in terms of treaty settlements that are to come? The MACA, Marine and Coastal Act. Where do we go with that? How does it impinge on iwi Māori's rights? And I'm not talking about a stakeholder either, because I'm not a stakeholder. And I think that one of the problems is that Māori keep getting pushed out into another category, like we're a stakeholder. Well, you ain't a stakeholder. There's a difference between a stakeholder and tangata whenua. Okay, I'll finish my rave, but I just want to know why all of a sudden Māori are the flavour of the month when we're needed, but never before. Māori organisations, tangata whenua organisations, iwi organisations, mātā waka organisations find it bloody difficult to even get in front of a whole range of things. But when inverted commas Pākehā organisations feel a bit of threat from whoever, government, council or whoever, sing out for tautoko from Māori. I just sort of, you know, and it's based on how old am I? 58 years of living on this earth. So I want to know what's in it for Māori.
Can I just try and respond to that? The whole thrust behind our approach to say, let's have an inclusive, facts-based, needs-based assessment that precedes any principles and is a fundamental part of a strategy, is to address exactly the issues that you're
And you can't do that by supporting anything else other than a deferral.
We cannot support a purely principles-based approach because it doesn't identify the broad range of needs and issues of all stakeholders who have an interest in marinas and marine recreational activity, which might utilise marina facilities. So that's all we're advocating, is that there is no exclusion, it's inclusion of everybody. And together we formulate an outcome that we can all be comfortable with.
But you guys have the run and inverted commas again, ownership of an asset that belongs to the council.
No, we don't, Councillor. You've got it wrong.
Wouldn't be the first time.
The berths are leased. Council owns the land currently. You talk about what's in it for Maori or not in it for Maori. One thing's for certain, if the land is sold into private ownership, there will be nothing there for Maori. While it's in lease, there is an income stream coming into council. We don't, as berth holders, we don't own anything. We own a licence to occupy. Council gets an income per annum through till, in Gulf Harbour's case, 2088, and then they wind up owning it all again and can release it or do whatever. To sell it now would be an absolute folly.
Can I just add to that? If you go down the track that's proposed and you allow apartments to be built on all these marinas, you won't have any space to launch a waka. You won't have any chance to do that. All these marinas have facilities for launching facilities that anyone can use, Maori, Pākehā, whoever. So if you go down this track of changing zonings and the council not sticking to their knitting of maintaining the zoning so they cannot be changed for housing, you won't have the opportunity, neither will we.
Okay, I think we need to, thank you, member, and thank you all. We'll take the next question from Councillor Lee, please.
Yeah, what in your view, what is the difference between a strategy and a list of principles, which the principles seem to be oriented towards property development? So you're asking for a strategy rather than principles. The council officers feel that we should support principles, and you're saying we should support a strategy for marinas. Is that right?
That's entirely correct. You may have seen copies of that before, and essentially principles form part of a strategy process. They are not a strategy in themselves. So we identified what Tony referred to earlier on as Strategy Planning 101, a 6-step process: gather the information, organise the process, identify the stakeholders, start the engagement, analyse data and issues, confirm understanding of what all those are, and then start to develop principles and priorities that are based on factual information, not dreamt up and open to wide interpretation. When you've that solid factual base, you're able to go into specific strategies and options for particular marinas, both on a regional and a local basis, develop plans around those, and you can work out how you can implement that strategy over a period of time. That, to us, is a marina strategy.
Councillor Stewart, please.
Thank you for that. I think you probably answered that. I think we're all stakeholders, and it doesn't matter who you are. I think we're all stakeholders. As Chair of Civil Defence, something I have discussed at some of my civil defence meetings with some of the staff and the stakeholders of other parts of civil defence, which could be all the emergency services and everything. If we, just for an example, if we did have an extreme weather event, which we have had, say out at Pine Harbour, a couple of times we've had boat roads that have been taken out. And so the marina is really the only way in and out. And one of the concerns we're starting to have a lot of extreme weather events all over the world, and we don't know what Mother Nature is actually going to be doing. So I would like to make sure that this is deferred, and before any decisions are made, that I'd like for this to also come back to a civil defence meeting with some of the supports that we have, whether it's the army or the forces or St John's and the Marine. I think everybody needs to be around this table, because once it's sold, once it's gone, and you can't have it back. You can't get it back. And I think water is something that we can, roads can be taken out, but water is something that I think the marinas are really, really important, and I would really like to put a recommendation up there somehow, maybe somebody can help word it, that before that this is deferred, and before we actually make a
Can I just come in there?
recommendation.
We're actually not on the item. We're actually hearing from.
All right. Well, when we get there, but would you would you be happy with me to try and do that, to get it deferred, to get it to a civil defence an emergency committee, because this is an extremely important issue for the people of Auckland, and I think also for, you know, we're talking about Maori, so would you be happy for me to do that for you?
Civil defence is a critical issue as far as Gulf Harbour is concerned, because it is a little unique in as much that there is only one road access. It has actually been taken out recently in 3 separate occasions, which has caused chaos. Yes. But in a natural disaster environment, there are 3 schools that would be on the wrong side of that disaster, and the Shakespeare Reserve and Gulf Harbour are probably the 2 most likely civil defence evacuation points, dependent upon weather. So I agree, civil defence should be, and I would suggest would be, a part of the stakeholder review process.
So, Councillor Stewart, I didn't recall you raising that at the workshop when we dealt with this. Did you ask for it to be referred to your committee?
What I do remember at the workshop, I think we did, and I think some of the other councillors around the table will probably support me there, that I think we did talk about civil defence being a very important part of it. It has been raised a number of times.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Could you advise me under standing orders where we take decisions at workshops?
Take guidance from workshops, and I'm just checking whether a matter was raised, was given attention at a workshop by the member as she is conveying it here. And I am asking that question. It's a fair question. Thank you. Finally, Mayor Goff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of the stakeholders here for presenting your views. I've got 2 questions. One is around this debate we're getting into between principles and strategy. To me, principles come first and strategy follows from principles. It doesn't work the other way around. And secondly, scope. Can I first just say, Mr. Chairman, this isn't about process. One of you quoted me before. I said there's no rush to make a decision here as far as I'm concerned. We need to be thorough, and it needs to be fully consulted. So if you have any worry, and some of your submissions suggested a worry about process, that's where I'm coming from, and I think all of my colleagues are coming from. This is not rushed through. There is no conspiracy theory. This council has made no commitment to sell. In fact, my position is a reluctance to sell land on the foreshore area because God's not making any more of it. So I want to come down to how wide do you want this inquiry to be, first of all? Norman Kirk once talked about paralysis through analysis, and I want to avoid that. You know, there is no rush, but we don't want to take 5 years over this and spend $4 million if that's not what is required. So my first question about scope, why wouldn't we focus on the 3 areas that are the controversial areas, which are West Park, Gulf Harbour, and third one, can't remember. No, actually, maybe it's the 2. West Haven, there is no proposal to sell. And I don't think any councillor around this table wants to sell it. That's not an issue. There is no proposal to sell Half Moon Bay, but you have got controversy around Gulf Harbour and West Park. So why wouldn't we focus in developing our principles, and then if need be going on to the strategy, on the two areas that you are here because you're concerned about. And then the second thing is, we can do a strategy a bit like Nelson. We can spend millions of dollars and we can take years. But isn't the right place to start fully consulting with you as stakeholders? But let me add one other thing. You're important as stakeholders, but there's one group even more important. It's the wider public, as far as I'm concerned, because our obligation is to the wider public, not to particular groups. So why wouldn't we start by trying to get agreement with all of you and the wider public about the principles that we should follow as a first step that clearly then actually guides the strategy that we develop? They're genuine questions. I'd like to hear from all or any of you on those questions.
June, to begin.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Goff. I find that very encouraging. But can I also say that the first thing you need to address is the Empowering Acts, because principles and strategies, however good they may be, that is the watershed. And that's why I keep raising it. That has to be addressed. We both have Empowering Acts. We both do.
Can I just, I'm really apologetic for interrupting, but Mr. Chairman, isn't it true that this council is bound by legislation? We can't ignore Empowering Acts. They bind us. I'm not quite sure where the disagreement arises there.
I wonder if we could take the broader view. I know you've got a deep interest in West Park Hobsonville, June.
But there is a simple answer to that, is your unitary plan, which provides for extensive residential development on West Park as of right, as a permitted activity. No impediment. That's one of the issues. And when I referred to 600 apartments, believe me, when we saw that in a Lagoima request email, it gave us a bit of a shock. But that is how the plan remains, as a permitted activity.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, if I could just add in Bayswater, where I've lived for 50 years and been involved in the development there. And Mr. Chairman, you were chairman of the Ngātaringa Bay Society when Robbins was there. Now, Bayswater's been manipulated and sold to a developer who's had several attempts to put apartments on it. This council, as I understand it, was looking at using the Special Housing Act to support this developer to do it. And there's also a problem with the transport, the ferry, the bus turnaround and all that sort of thing. All this stuff has been sold off. That's what I've been trying to say to you at the council here. You need to stick to your knitting and stick to the Empowering Acts and not allow any changes of zoning on these marine facilities. That's what the problem is. If you don't allow it, you should be you are and should be in complete control of zone changes. And
so just on Bayswater, look, there's quite a lot of information which needs to be checked here, because the council did not entertain an SHA. Councillor Hulse, you'll recall it, we rejected it. We rejected it outright because we knew that there was a process to go through on Bayswater and it had to go through the independent hearings panel. And we are not selling any of the land that supports our transport facilities at Bayswater. We're not doing that. So I haven't heard anybody mention that. No one in the private sector has approached us on acquiring that land. They won't get a look in if they did.
Well, you need to just stick to the zoning and not have it changed. West Haven, I fought 129,000 square feet of apartments, which would be on there now, and that was trying to change the zoning.
We'll be sticking to the rules as they are and the legislation as it is. Yeah. So look, I need to move on. I think we've had a good hearing.
Mr. I just want to say one thing. Come back to the Mayor's question.
Okay, please. Richard, do you want to?
Yes, please. I understand there are all sorts of different ways of tackling strategy, but I have never encountered a strategy that does not first of all address present state and look at future state, and principles are part of the pathway in everything I've ever come across. So that's all I can say in response to that. But you've also talked about an understandable concern about dollars and timeline. We're banding around years, we're banding around dollars. What I suggested earlier on was that council engage with stakeholders and map out an approach that we can all live with and that has some sensible dollars, and we do understand the timeline, because this report is quite clear that it hasn't done that work. All right.
Just to recap, you say principles are part of the pathway, but you would prefer to engage with the stakeholders, and that is not just yourselves, that's a broad church, and then there is a critical partner that is mana whenua as well. And just continue that, sorry, Richard, you would like to identify that process, or that part of the process, to better inform the principles development, which could lead to the development of a strategy.
It's part of the strategy process. I just come back to what we submitted to council in November. It's a step along the way. What we're asking is that the whole strategy process is completed. But I don't believe that it takes the time and the dollars that are being bandied about here, and particularly when you haven't sat down with the people who've got a body of knowledge to contribute to that, to actually work out the best approach. We don't want you to spend any more of our money than is absolutely necessary.
And so you stand by what you put in your submission, I don't know when this one was, that a broad set of principles may underpin a regional strategy.
No, it's not what I said.
No, you actually write that.
In what?
You write it, I'm reading, and a broad set of principles may underpin a regional strategy.
Yes, it may, but it's also preceded by a clear understanding of needs and issues. It's part of the process.
It's part of the process, yes. Which is what you attest to. Thank you.
And if we start with the Empowering Acts, can I say, it will save a great deal of money.
Yes.
The legislation is very clear.
Thank you. Okay, look, we'll conclude that. Thank you all. I do want to say that we've heard from a number of you before on a number of occasions, and we'll continue to hear from you. I want to just say that we don't accept public input at workshops. And that is the agreement of the Mayor and all the councillors and the members from the Independent Maori Statutory Board member that make up all the committees. Our workshops are for frank and free discussion. And of course, you are welcome at these forums. And that's why you've been accepted at this forum here today. So what is the point of order?
This notion that the public can be excluded. The public can be included in a workshop if the council so desires, and I've
not had the request.
It might be your view, but it's not necessarily my view.
Okay, it's not a point of order, and I've not had a request from Councillor Walker for your attendance at the workshop. So thank you. Would somebody like to move the A, the B, and the C? I'll move I'll take Councillor Simpson and Councillor Collins move in second. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Thank you. Take a 5-minute adjournment.
Would you be able to circulate the Shearer Consulting letter to other participants? It's not on the agenda.
There's some copies on the desks here. We'll make sure you have a copy. Thank you. Take a 5-minute adjournment, members.